where you're watching us from today. I'm coming on at a slightly earlier time than expected. I was supposed to come in online at 5, but because of unavoidable circumstances and I don't want to miss to record this session, that's why I've come up as a slightly earlier session. Today, I thought I'm going to talk a little bit about something to do with sustainability. We are on a 30-day intermittent fasting challenge, and we have been challenging ourselves for these 30 days to kind of go and feed within a given fasted period. And then the next of the period where we are feeding, we are considering what are we eating. We are considering the rate at which we are eating. We are considering what you're putting in ourselves, so that at the end of the day, we can be able to achieve better health outcomes. And today's, I've been trying to come online as often as I can. I've been online for the past 17 days. Today is the 18th day, and I'm just coming online today kind of in a way to discuss a different aspect of intermittent fasting. And today I will be discussing the aspect of the topic of sustainability. We have heard so many movements around the world that have been talking about global warming. If you live in a place where you've seen maybe wildfires, maybe you've seen things like earthquakes, not earthquakes, you've seen things like floods and things like that have become very common in our daily life. And so many people are actually talking about how the global environment, or the global climate, or the environment around the globe is actually changing, is becoming more hotter. So many things are happening, and some of them have actually been attributed to food production. And so I have been doing research for the last, I don't know how many years, and my research basically focuses on sustainability. I try to understand if alternative proteins are the source to sustainability or are the solution to sustainability. So when I was doing my PhD, for example, I concentrated more on finding alternatives to whey protein, which is a dairy protein, and I worked on years and years on pea protein, extracting pea protein, and trying to characterize it as an option or alternative, as a potential replacer for animal proteins. And then post that, I've gone into doing different researches, and recently I've started to work on things like lupin protein. I've done some work on soy protein. I've done some work on insect protein. And this has really continued to spark that desire and that kind of, in a way, hunger within me to try and understand the concept of sustainability, particularly when it comes to food and nutrition. And so to begin us off today, I would like kind of in a way to begin by defining a sustainable diet, so that we can, when you talk about sustainability and we are trying to understand how on earth can intermittent fasting be linked to sustainability, is it in any way linked? Let's begin by defining the concept of sustainability, or a sustainable healthy diet. So a sustainable healthy diet is defined as a dietary pattern that promotes all dimensions of an individual's health and well-being, have low environmental pressure and impact. They are accessible, affordable, safe, and not equitable and culturally acceptable. There are so many aspects to sustainable diet, to a sustainable healthy diet. And so when you start to break this down into smaller chunks, you're talking about it needs to be, it needs to enhance the well-being of an individual. It needs to have a low environmental impact, puts no pressure on the environment, and then it has low environmental pressure and impact, and is accessible, something that you can easily find, something that is safe, something that is equitable, that allows every single person to be able to get a healthy meal, and something that is culturally acceptable. And so imagine what I usually think about when I talk about sustainability. The resources that we have on this earth are not in any way increasing. If anything, they are shrinking as we continue to grow, as the world population continues to grow. And recently, we hit 9 billion people on the planet Earth. It's 9 or 8, whatever. And one of the things that I literally was thinking about, all these individuals need actually to be given food, and particularly protein plays an important role when it comes to the growth and the development of individuals. And so it's a very important part and parcel of a healthy diet. When you're thinking about protein for muscle growth, for development, and all these kind of things, it's important for you to get your protein for your growth and development, and particularly for the young people, for the children and things like that. If you're active as well, you need that to avoid muscle loss. If you're elderly, again, there are things like muscle wasting and things like that. So protein is quite important, or is quite significant when it comes to our day-to-day life. And so when you try to think about generally, a lot of people nowadays are talking about, okay, we need to look for, as I said, I work on alternative protein sources. But as I've been doing this challenge, I've been asking myself, Claire, do you really need to continue looking for these resources, alternative sources of protein? The answer, of course, is absolutely yes. But then there are some issues. Issue number one, we need to address the fact that we are wasting quite a lot of food. If you try to understand and to look at even like the globe, the developed world, and think about how the developed world is actually like, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of food that goes down the drain on a single day basis. Think about your own house. If you went to the shop and bought massive food, maybe it was an offer, did you end up cooking all that food, or some of it ended up down in the drain? And so, when you're thinking about this, one of the things that I've realized about intermittent fasting, and this I'm talking from a very practical point of view, in my house, if you come to my household, I tend to be the one who does a lot of the shopping for food. I do the food shop most of the time. Whenever I am doing a fasting, the intermittent fasting, for example, that I've been doing, I find that I go to the shops much more less, because obviously if I'm eating only maybe a meal at the end of the day, and I don't need to go 3, 4, 5 times in the shop as usually, sometimes I can easily find myself doing it. And of course, at the end of it all, one, if I'm reducing the frequency of which I'm going to the shop, simply because I am eating less, and because I am eating less, then I don't need to buy more. Of course, if you really want to kind of think about it that way, but of course, people can still decide to still shop the same way. But I believe that if you're doing intermittent fasting, there must be at least some shift in your shopping patterns. And so when I reduce, first of all, the trips that I make to the shop, because I don't need that much food if I'm not eating breakfast, if I'm not eating lunch, and I'm just eating like a big meal at the end of the day, that reduces the food mileage going all the way to the shops to buy my food. But also it means that if I have the food that I have, I'm going to try to eat as much as I can. And most of the time when I fast, actually, I prepare food that I just need. I don't think like, oh, I'm gonna be having another food tomorrow a day. I don't cook in advance and things like that. And when I'm cooking exactly what I need, it means at the end of the day, I am going to contribute towards environmental sustainability, because I'm going to reduce the food waste. And of course, as I'm reducing the food waste, it means that fewer resources will be wasted in food production and transportation if everybody decided just to kind of adopt a way or a lifestyle in which, one, we are wasting less food. And that does not necessarily mean just because you're fasting, or you can actually make it a desire and say to yourself, I'll only buy what I need. But particularly, I find myself when I'm fasting, I don't like, those are the days that even at home I'm being told we are wasting the least of food, because when I'm finishing off the fasting, I am looking for those healthy foods. I tend also to shop healthy stuff around, because that's what I want to reach out for at the end of the day. And that can actually contribute to environmental sustainability. And probably when we start to think about those alternative sources of protein, those can be sources that are helping us to be able to diversify the availability of protein to feed the growing population, rather than using it as a way of coming up with new protein sources that might still end up just being wasted at the end of the day. Number two, when you're thinking about these, when you're thinking about intermittent fasting, the second thing to think about is health sustainability. If you do intermittent fasting correctly, it can promote things like it can promote your insulin sensitivity. It can reduce or aid in weight management, and of course that can potentially have so many health benefits, which can result into a more, in a way, sustained, healthier life. But then there are a few things that I'd like to discuss at this moment before I go further, because somebody can be asking, is intermittent fasting really a sustainable diet? And there are things that I want to address by kind of like looking at a couple of things that you need to think about if you really want to make intermittent fasting a sustainable diet, and that means that it will result in health sustainability. Number one, try different timing options. If you find that in a way you're used to just doing, let's say, 16-8, 16-8 and things like that, and you're not seeing much shifts and differences, it might be that, and sometimes maybe you might not necessarily know the right way, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and that can actually demoralize you from continuing with the fasting. And you may actually just say to yourself, you'll try different options until you find what works well for you. Number two, you need to be flexible. Fasting is not an easy deal. It's not something that is very easy for the body, because it will be demanding. It will be asking for its rights and things like that. You might go into cravings. I discussed cravings yesterday. You can watch that video. You might go into hunger pangs. Your body might throw tantrums. Like you might have headaches. You might have irritability. You might have insomnia, all those things. And it's just much more easier for you to get comfort in going back to food. But then if you've decided you're going to be fasting for 16 hours and then you've only fasted for 14 hours, don't beat yourself up and say the way you are a failure, you can't do it, you're not meant for fasting. You should pat yourself at the back and say, hey lady, hey, you've done so well, you've come so far to be able to do those 14 hours, and then the next day try to get to the next 2 hours on top and things like that. I've also mentioned that you need to be patient. If this has to be a longer term sustainable thing, you have to be patient. Most of us can get into the place where we just want to see quick fix, quick results, and quick everything, and that can result in so much frustrations, that can result in so much impatience, and that's not going to help you on the journey of weight loss. Be patient. You might not necessarily see so much differences in your health as you want to do it in a quick time, but if you're consistent about it, as I've told you, my desire is to have intermittent fasting as a lifestyle. I want to do this for the longer term to reap the benefits out of it. It's not just a sprint. It's kind of, I look at life as a marathon. I look at life as something that I want to do for the longer term, for the longer season. And so it needs to be something that will be done through a lot of patience. Number 4 thing to think about is, all the time, try to think and review your thought process. Think about fasting as a break from food and not deprivation. You're not depriving yourself at the end of the fast. You're only taking a break to allow your digestive system to rest, to allow your body to come back to kind of a normal circadian system. And then after that, a rhythm, you go back to eating. But then when you're going back to eating, you don't want to start eating, like, as they say, crap in, crap out. You want to eat more healthy. You want to eat food that is more good for your health. And so don't look at it as a time and a moment of deprivation, because once you're feeling deprived, you'll go into the cravings, you'll cave into your cravings, and that's not going to result in any good at the end of the day. And of course, the other thing is to try different timing options. I've already said that, sorry. And then one of the things that you might not necessarily realize, that there is so much time that you save when you're on intermittent fasting. I've mentioned like how I tend to be more productive when I'm fasting, because at the end of the day, when I'm fasting, I'm actually allowing myself to be able, kind of in a way, to not spend more time in the kitchen. I have more time to do many things. And I'm just talking about some of the things that we have done, like publishing stuff, writing stuff, and things like that, doing my own work, day-to-day work, and it becomes much more easier because of it's something that gives you more time. And so appreciate that time and put that time to great use. And if you're not putting that time to great use, you get to a point where you feel disappointed again. You can easily get distracted along the line or disrupted. And that's not something you want for your fasting, because you're not going to do it in the longer term. And then number 6, do not underestimate the busy factor. It helps when you're doing fasting, when you're busy, because before you realize, the end of the day has come and you've gone to the next day. But if you're not busy, you're just sitting, let's say, and watching TV, which is not bad at all, it's a good thing to do, catching up with the news and sitting on the couch and things like that, you can easily get to a point that you start to think like your mind is not on it. And before you realize, the day seems like eternity. And before you realize, you've gone away, you've broken the fast, you've gone and grabbed that burger and things like that. But when you decide and say, like, look at those periods and times and seasons where you find it much more easier for you to be a little bit busy. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was telling me she's on this journey. She started off way much more earlier than myself, and she was telling me, like, she's found the days that she's at the university, she has more effective fasting than when she's at home. The kids are there, hubby is home, and all these kind of things can be super much of a not discouragement, but more of like a disruption rather than anything else, or distraction, depending on what you want, the context you're talking about. And just being able to find a duration of time where you're not going to be sitting down and counting the hours, the minute to the last second until you are able to break the fast can really be helpful. Then the other thing is exercise. If you really want to have a sustainably longer, maybe say, lifestyle of intermittent fasting, I am never going to emphasize enough exercise, because one, exercise will help you with preventing the loss of muscle mass, but also exercise can do things like I've mentioned, will do things like work on your mental health, work on your mental welfare, work on your emotions and things like that, strengthen your heart, etc. Those are not some of the things that you'll get through fasting. So again, it's one of the things to think about if you introduce exercise as part of your regime. Drinking a lot of water. I'll never again talk about that in enough, because I've mentioned I do a minimum of 2 liters in a day, but you can drink more depending on your needs. Some people, I know Ray was saying she does 3 liters. I know Abby says about 2 and 2.5. Some people do whatever, but I just said if you're doing more than 3 liters, etc. and above, just be careful with your electrolyte balance, because you don't want to end up with hyponatremia. That's something to be careful with. And then going back into, so we've talked about number 1, environmental sustainability. We have said it reduces transportation, looking for food waste, etc., and that can actually contribute towards a reduction in our impact the food production has on the environment. And as I was saying, like, sometimes when you're thinking about how much we're wasting, maybe just eating less, or eating maybe what we eat at a duration of time that is limited could be super helpful. And then, of course, we talked about health sustainability, and I've just given you some ways in which you can work around having this intermittent fasting as a sustainable lifestyle, that you can do it in a longer term, which is again another definition of sustainability or sustainable. And then the number 3 thing, there is that ethical sustainability. There are some people that can't choose intermittent fasting for ethical reasons. So, or things like, for example, reducing their reliance on factory farmed and processed foods, which can, of course, be less sustainable. And of course, things like being sustainable, looking at sustainability from that animal welfare and environmental impact. And that is something that you are on a journey, because you want to try and reduce the impact that you're having on things like the environment, etc., through the ethical considerations of intermittent fasting. That's something else to consider. And then the last thing for today, or the final thing that I want to address in terms of this sustainability, is that long-term sustainability. Did I just say long-term sustainability? Of course, if you're doing it as a lifestyle, and I've given you 7 or 8 different ways in which you can make this to become part of your lifestyle, what happens is that if you choose it and you ensure that you have a balance and adopt it to an individual, so you're doing it in such a way that at the end of the day, you are eating a balanced diet, you're having the right calories, the right fuel for your body, you're not overeating or you're not under eating. So you are healthy lifestyle, being followed as a result of you continuing with intermittent fasting, this can actually help to, again, factoring in things like individual needs, individual preferences. All these are essential and are needed to ensure it's a sustainable, healthy approach for any individual's specific circumstances. Having talked about that, as I bring this to a land or to an end, I want to encourage you to let you know that incorporating intermittent fasting into anybody's lifestyle with a focus on health, environmental impact, and ethical considerations, among others, can actually be something that can align with the broader sustainable development goals, that the UN Sustainable Development Goals. However, the most important thing to realize is that it is crucial to consult with a healthcare professional so that at the end of the day, or a nutritionist or somebody, as I say, who knows and who understands your journey, who knows and understands your story, these people can actually help you before you make any significant changes to your diet or fasting regime to ensure that it's safe and suitable for you. So again, it's something that intermittent fasting has its own benefits, but then before you adopt this into your lifestyle, please speak to somebody that knows you, that knows your story, that can walk with you through the journey, and not somebody that just comes, for example, here to give educational information, even though it's lived, even though I live the things that I talk about. I just don't talk about head knowledge, but I live and practice the things I talk about. But you'll find that your journey will be so different from my journey. Your story is so different from my story. And so if this is something that you are doing or you want to stay with, or like me, you want to do it for the longer time, it might just be worthwhile doing it with somebody that understands your story. And so that was the end of day 18 of our intermittent fasting challenge. Tomorrow is day 19, and I have the privilege and the honor of being joined by the one and only Abby at Abby's coaching house. She will be coming here. We will be discussing various aspects and different things, because I know beyond doubt I've said Abby is doing this journey together with me. And so would you consider joining us tomorrow, coming online at 3 p.m., which is going to be British Summer Time, or at 5 p.m., which is the East African time, to come and hang out with myself and my friend Abigail. That will be amazing. And if you find that this has been helpful in any way, we want to first of all thank everyone who continues to support us. We thank you for watching. We thank you for sharing. We thank you for liking. We thank even those that have subscribed. But if you haven't done so, why not consider clicking that like button, sending this information to your friends, acquaintances, neighbors, relatives, etc., that you think can actually be able to benefit from. And if you haven't done it, why not consider subscribing so that this can help us, support us to continue doing what we are doing. And so tonight, I want you to know, as I bring this to an end, that you are highly celebrated, appreciated, and loved. My prayer for you is that you will continue to prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Until next time, I hope you have a good evening, and I shall see you tomorrow when I catch up with my dear friend and sister Abigail. Until then, goodbye.